All right. Section 3.1c, graphing linear equations. And as you know, we've been splitting up here section 3.1 into 3 different sections just because there's a lot of different things to cover and a lot of different ways to do these. So in this one, we're going to graph linear equations, which you've kind of been doing with t-tables and value tables, whatever you want to call them. Today, we're going to kind of use x and y-intercepts to do it, showing you a different way. You can always use your value tables, but this way, some of you might find a little bit easier. So let's first start out with what an x-intercept is. X-intercept is when the x-coordinate of the point at which the graph crosses the x-axis, the x-coordinate at the point in which the graph crosses the x-axis. And then the y-intercept is just the opposite. It's the y-coordinate of the point at which the graph crosses the y-axis. Okay, so let's think about that in the terms of a graph. If I were to draw the graph down here, if it were to cross the x-axis here, what would the x-coordinate be? Depends on how many numbers you are this way, and the y-coordinate here. Okay, so to find that, we got to look at what the other coordinate would be. So to find the x-intercept, we're basically going to set y equal to 0. Okay, because if you find the y is at 0, then we know that over here is where it's going to cross the x-axis, somewhere where y is 0. And same thing with the y-intercept, just the opposite. Set x equal to 0, and when x is 0, you're just going to be up and down on this y-axis. So whatever y is when x is 0. So you're basically setting the opposite variable to 0, the opposite axis to 0, and that's how you would do it. So for example, an easy way to graph, if you found out that, say, the x-intercept here was 1, 2, 3, and the y-intercept was, say, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, then we could graph this by just putting the point there, y equals 4, x equals 3, and then drawing a graph right through there, and that would be good enough. Okay, that would be good enough. 2 points that go through each axis, and we'd be happy with that. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Okay, so let's work on a couple problems with that. It says find the x and y-intercepts of the graph. So this one first, we're just going to let's start with the x-axis, and we just look, and we're basically looking at where the x value is when it crosses the x-axis. So here's the x-axis, and we look down here. That's where it crosses the x-axis. What is x at that moment? It's 20. So the x-intercept would be 20, and the y-intercept here is where what's the y value where it crosses the y-axis. So up here we're going up. Remember, up is y. So the y value there is 30. So the y-intercept here would be 30. Okay? So just where they cross that axis. Simple so far, right? All right, so the next step is we're going to take a look and say, describe what the intercepts mean in the graph. So first we're going to find the intercepts, and then we're going to talk about what they actually mean. So let's start with the x-intercept, and we'll say x-intercept. Okay, so we're down here. We know how to do that. Where does it cross the x-axis? So if this is our x, and this is our y here, and I'm actually going to draw this over here, x-axis. Okay, so if that's our x and y, where does this line cross the x-axis? Well, it crosses over here at 14. So we know that. That's pretty easy. That's the easy part. And then down here, let's take a look at what our y-intercept is. Okay, it's where it crosses the y-axis, which is up here. And so I think we can all agree that that's 10,000. And we're talking about 10,000 gallons. 10,000 gallons. Okay. So that's finding the axis. Now let's talk about what they mean. So I'm going to start with the y one here just because we just did that one. And we'll look at what this means. It's the volume in gallons. Okay, and it starts at 10,000. And because we're talking about draining a pool, okay, we're going to talk about, this is where the pool starts. The pool has 10,000 gallons to start with. Because we're draining it, and we're at 0 time here, so nothing's happened. So we started with 10,000 gallons. So basically that's what we're going to say for what it means. The pool starts, because we're starting at 0, with 10,000 gallons before we drained it, okay, before we drained the pool. So that's what the y-axis means. I'll talk about the x-axis. The x-axis is talking about time. And if we take a look at the graph, how the graph goes down, the number, how much volume, how much water is in the pool, it goes down to 0 at 14 hours time. So how long did it take to drain the pool? That's what the x-intercept means, that it takes 14 hours to drain the pool. 14 hours to drain the pool. I'll just make that hours up here. Okay, so pretty simple there, looking at the graphs, what the x and y intercepts are, and then describing what they mean. Okay, all right, next up, determine the x and y intercepts of 3x plus 2y equals 9. And then graph that equation over to the right on that graph. So we're going to take this equation, 3x plus 2y equals 9. Okay, and remember, how we solve for the x-intercept is we're going to set y equal to 0. We're going to set y equal to 0. So I'm going to just take a 0 and plug that in for y. Okay, and doing that, it's going to make life a lot easier right in here because we know that 2 times y is going to be 0. Okay, so now it's going to kind of eliminate that, and I'm going to be left with 3x equals 9. And then if we divide each side by 3, then I can say that x is equal to 3. So my x-intercept up here would be 3. Okay, so life is good so far. Now let's take a look at our y-intercept. Same idea. I'm going to do that in blue here. So our y-intercept, I'm going to use the same equation because that hasn't changed. That's the equation of the line. Nothing has changed there. But now, instead of setting y equal to 0, I'm going to set x equal to 0. So plug an x in there. And the same deal, 3 times 0 we know is going to be 0, so I don't even need to write that. It's going to eliminate that out, and we're going to be left with 2y equals 9. And then, so as our rule stated before, you set the x or y equals 0 and then solve for the other variable. So here I'm setting x equal to 0, and then I'm solving for y. So I'm going to divide by 2, and y equals 4.5. So my y-intercept here would be 4.5. I hate drawing 5s on the smartboard because it doesn't match up all the time. I guess I have to do it the old way. All right, so 4.5. Now the next thing was to graph the equation. So we're going to graph it. And remember, we're looking at the x-coordinate. The x-intercept is where it crosses. So the y-coordinate, or is the x-coordinate where it crosses the x-axis. So here is your x-coordinate of 3. Smartboard's a little off. And then your y-axis, your y-coordinate, your y-intercept, where it crosses the y-intercept, or it crosses the y-axis, sorry, would be at 4.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, somewhere in here. Oh, great. Nice smartboard here. 2, 3, 4. So let's try that. There, good. So now I can take a graph and draw a line through those 2 points. The best I can. Try that again. Let's go this way. There we go. And then just draw little arrows. Make sure you got arrows on each side, and we're good to go. Okay. Ignore this little point there. And that would be our graph. So a little bit simpler than making a tables value because you can just do 2 points here and you're good to go. Okay. Let's try this one because this one has a little twist on it, and we'll just talk through it and it'll be no problem. So determine the x and y intercepts and then graph this equation. This will be the last one today. So for the x-intercept, remember, I want to make it so y is equal to 0 here. What's that going to be? All right, so I'm going to use this equation, negative x plus 2y equals 3. Okay, and I'm going to substitute y in for, a 0 in for y. So 0 goes in for y here. All right, so we know that this is going to kind of be eliminated. 2 times 0 is 0. So I'm going to have negative x equals 3. Well, Have we ever wanted to solve for a negative x ever? No, a negative x means nothing to me, so I need a positive x. So how can I make it positive? Well, I'm just going to divide through by a -1, and that'll get rid of my negative here, and I'll have x equals a -3. It's going to change the sign on the other side. So that's one of them. So my x-intercept, we know, is -3. Okay. For my y, use the same equation. And remember, y-intercept is where x is equal to 0. So I'm going to substitute that in. So my y-intercept, using the same equation, -x. I'm just going to kind of draw a line here so we don't confuse that stuff. Plus 2y equals 3. And now I'm substituting in x, a 0 in for this x. So that's going to get rid of that. So that's not going to, is a -0 anything? I mean, if we plug in a -0, does that do anything? No, it's still 0. No big deal. Okay? And so now what we're left with is 2y equals 3. If I divide by 2, just solving for y now, I'm going to end up with y equals 1.5. So my y-intercept is 1.5. And my x-intercept is -3. So now we're going to graph those over here. So x is at -3, so I should be back here somewhere. Oops, my bad. What the heck happened there? Okay, here we go. Back to the graph. Sorry about that. So now we talked about x being -3. So we're going to be backwards here, 3. There. And then our y value was a 1.5. So that's up here, around there, somewhere 1.5. Okay, and then we're going to put that line right through those two. If I can draw the line correctly. There you go. And then I'm just going to make sure I draw an arrow in both directions. Sometimes you just draw that on. You'll be better drawing than I am on the smartboard. And there you go. So these problems are a little bit easier. Remember, you can still use a table of values with x and y values and a bunch of numbers there, but you don't have to because now we have x and y intercepts that we can use to graph. Okay? So our lesson summary, basically want in your own words how to find the x and y intercepts. In your own words, how do we do that? And then the practice problem here is find the x and y intercepts for the equation. 3x minus 5y equals 30. And I don't think there's any, I think those should come out to nice and easy numbers for you. No decimals or fractions there, so it should be nice for you. So do those. That's 3-1C. And bring any questions you have with you as we go on. All right? And that should do it. All right. Have a great day.